I was supposed to cover this last week, but I couldn't again because of this shitty technical problems. But then development just keep happening, right? The world just keeps on going, right? And things keep on happening. And there's some interesting things that I want to talk about. So basically, as you guys know, last week Israel decided to bomb Qatar, something unprecedented in the history of the Middle East for such like Gulf countries, which are usually known to be under the umbrella and protection of the United States. But it looks like the United States has sold Qatar to Israel, you know, and from the looks of it, from the looks of it, it just it's just gonna get worse and worse from here on, because America will defend these countries, these Gulf countries, which are under its umbrella and protection, against its enemies, against America's enemies, which are Iran and its proxies. But it's not gonna protect these countries from their enemy, which is not America's enemy, which is of course Israel. And these countries are quickly starting to understand these facts. But this is not the issue here. The strike on Qatar is bigger than the strike itself. It's a message to the whole region. That was the first thing that came to my head when I saw the news. Oh, Israel has struck Qatar. I was like, this is not against Qatar. And even if, by the way, the assassination failed, but even if it succeeded and it killed the Hamas guys, first of all, a few things. The Hamas guys there hardly have any weight in their movement, like in that Hamas thing, Hamas group. The real guys are the ones in the Gaza Strip, like the fighters, because the process here, decision making uh, process in Hamas, if for those of you guys who don't know, basically goes like this. Their proposal is presented to these guys, the ones in Qatar, sometimes in Turkey, sometimes in Egypt. It's presented to those guys. They're called the political bureau branch. Those guys take the thing. Then it's the proposal, Israeli proposal, maybe American proposal, maybe sometimes mediators proposal. They take that proposal, they discuss it among themselves, they make a decision, but that's not the final decision. The decision just matters to a certain degree. The last say is always in Gaza. Those are the guys fighting and doing all the stuff, right? The proposal goes to those guys, and they have this way of communicating. I don't know how they communicate, but whatever method it is, but it goes to the guys in Gaza. Those guys are the ones who make the final decision. They discuss it among themselves with all the factions in Gaza, and they make a final decision. So those guys are the most important. So that was a one side of the thing. The other side, why the strike on Qatar wasn't just like, oh, we want to eliminate those Hamas people, they're important leaders in Qatar, blah, blah, blah. The other reason is that striking, if they wanted to do that, they can get them like in many ways, that like they didn't have to blatantly strike Qatar and then claim it. That's the worst thing, that's even a bigger thing, to strike and then claim. Normally what they do, this like when they do this assassination stuff, they don't claim them. Everybody knows it's Israel, but they don't claim it, right? So by striking so clearly and then claiming it, it sends two messages. Number one is a message to the whole region that we are like the big boys of this region, like, and we can get anyone, anywhere, anytime we want, and nobody's gonna stop us. Even these guys who are supposedly under the protection of the United States, if we want to get them, we are gonna go get them. And this is what they do, by the way. It was fully coordinated by the United States military in Qatar. Look at that level of betrayal. If it was Qatar, man, and of course I know there's nothing they can do about it, by the way. Like, Qatar can hardly do anything about it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this was a message to the whole region, specifically to one country. And that country is, of course, Turkey. Turkey has been under huge um, campaign of disinformation and attacks from Israeli trolls and social media accounts. They're, in my opinion, preparing the ground for the next phase after they finish off Iran. Of course, Iran is still like it's not done. There's not been a regime change. The regime's still there. It's been badly hurt, of course, by the quote unquote 12-day war, but it's still going on, right? And it can very quickly heal and like get back to its former strength, right? So Iran is still not done yet. That's why when Israel and Iran were going at it, the country that was praying the most for Iran not to fall was Turkey. And that's not because Turkey likes Iran. On the contrary, I think Turkey does not trust Iran one bit. In fact, they don't like them. They've been messing up things in their neighborhood in Syria, propping up militias and um, ruining Turkey's name and calling them Zionist and all that stuff, right? So many other things, by the way. So Turkey has no love for Iran. But seeing Iran fall will be disastrous because the next one in the list after Iran is Turkey. And Turkey is not dumb. The Turkish leadership is not dumb. They understand this. They know that if Israel succeeds with its plans on Iran, they're going to be next, you know? And in their opinion, they feel like they're not ready to face Israel as they are right now. So their plan is to bet on time. They want to have as much time as possible, gain time, and then grow themselves. The way I saw it was that this was a message to Turkey, and Israel has been preparing the ground with propaganda and lobbying in Washington and like all the things you can imagine, even news articles. So I'll tell you a few stories to show like how Israel is preparing the ground. And by the way, before talking about these articles, I want to tell you something. The story between these two is not recent. Israel has been targeting Turkey for a while now. And for a while, I mean around maybe even 20 years ago, right? Because Turkey has for a long time now, they had scientists and engineers and all sorts of prominent people in the defense sector specifically mysteriously being assassinated. Engineers, scientists. What does that remind you of? What does that remind you of? Iran, right? Before this, like blatantly, before October 7th, Israel used to carry out operations in Iran, inside Iran. It used to be assassinations, nuclear assassinations of nuclear scientists, and all sorts of scientists, like sometimes missile scientists, scientists who used, or engineers. Sorry, I don't know the exact word. I'm not an expert, but they used to do a lot of assassinations in Iran prior to this. Same with Turkey. But the Turks did not want to talk about this because they didn't want things to escalate. You understand? In fact, the current foreign minister of Turkey, who was formerly the spy chief of Turkey, MIT, that's the name of the Turkish intelligence agency. He was poisoned. He revealed, I think, that this year or last year. It was very close. It wasn't that far. Yeah, I think it was a few months ago. Maybe this year. Probably this year. So he revealed that he was poisoned with arsenic and his life was in danger. But luckily enough, like the poisoning was discovered and like something was like it was handled, right? Now this leaves you to ponder who could be the suspect here, like who could try to poison Turkish um, spy chief, because that's such a big thing to do. Could be Russia, could be the US even, the Americans are very treacherous. But I think the biggest possibility is that it's the Israelis. And that's what I think it is. It is the Israelis. Anyway, coming back to what I wanted to tell you guys. So Israel has been doing this media campaign to demonize Turkey and set the ground for the next step, which is gonna be probably sanctions and other things they're gonna try to do to weaken Turkey. In my opinion, it's not gonna be a military escalation between Turkey and Iran. I mean, Turkey and Israel at this moment. Turkey is not some worn out um, country like Iran is or Iraq was during the US invasion. They're gonna defend themselves, and Israel is gonna suffer a lot. So I don't think the military stuff is gonna be the choice here. What they're gonna try to do is a regime change. They tried it through a coup in 2016, they failed, but now the ruling party is having a very tough time in the country. Um, if there was an election today, there's a very good chance that they wouldn't win that election. So Israel is betting on this. They're going to try their best to start a campaign of demonization to hopefully influence the elections in 2028. Turkey, Turkey is to Israel what China is to the United States. Turkey has a strong economy. China has a strong economy. Turkey has a very good defense industry, and there's continuously popping out like some interesting weaponry, right? They just started creating their own indigenous air defense systems, aiming to reach the level of Israel and create something similar, or maybe even superior to the Iron Dome that Israel has. They started working, or rather, they are working on a fifth generation fighter jet, which is something so impressive, by the way, that even Israel is not currently capable of doing. Another thing is they are like the best drone manufacturers in Europe and the region too. Israel cannot compete in that sector, by the way, the drone stuff. So Turkey is a real threat in that aspect, in terms of like they're catching up not only in terms of like quantity, military quantity. Even Iran can do that. Iran has a massive army, but that's not a threat to Israel. As long as they have the air dominance and air superiority, that's not a problem, right? But Turkey is not only developing fifth generation fighter jets, which is like the ace that Israel has currently, is also developing and mass producing hypersonic missiles. The president a few months ago was saying that they're working to increase their stockpiles of long range missiles. And that spooked Israel because they know they are like the target. They know they're the country that Turkey is trying to deter here. There's no other, like, nobody. Turkey's like, when Turkey says we're working on different systems, we're working on technology similar to the S-400, basically an indigenous air defense system. And when they say they're working on a fifth generation fighter jet, Israel has tried its best, by the way. They went to Washington and lobbied against giving Turkey those F-35, even though Turkey was a partner in producing some parts of that plane. So Israel tried, but Turkey came up with its own solution, which is to produce its own fighter, fifth generation fighter jet, which is something only a handful of countries around the world can do currently. So in that aspect, Turkey is a real threat. When you look at it from that angle, it's a real threat in terms of like catching up in terms of military technology. They're catching up and they're catching up really fast. So Israel wants to do something about it already. But there's not much choices here in terms of ways to deal with Turkey. Turkey has a lot of cards in its hands. As I told you, remember, Turkey is not some worn out country which has been like the US has sanctioned the hell out of. They're a strong country. They're struggling right now because of inflation and other stuff. But they have a strong economy. They have very patriotic people. They have a very, very strong, if not the best, defense industry in all of Europe. Maybe Russia has a better one and a bigger one. But enough about that. So we're gonna talk about how Israel is trying, or has already started, to demonize Turkey in its media outlets, and it's pushing this to the international media as well. So a few weeks ago, Israeli Interior Minister, or was it National Security Minister, this guy called Ben Gavir, there was an assassination attempt on him, which failed. And Israel quickly started to put out that Turkey was the one behind this, even though there was no evidence to show for this. But of course, as I told you, the goal here is not for things to be right or wrong or accurate. The goal is to just put continuously pressure on Turkey. After a few days from there, if I remember correctly, there was an incident in the outskirts of Damascus, in a village called Kiswa. Al Kiswa, Kiswa, I don't remember exactly, but it was night hours basically, and the Syrian military was doing some routine uh, patrols in that village, and they came across this mysterious device, and they started looking into it, and they discovered it's a spy listening device, and they quickly sent in experts in order to dismantle it. The moment they started to dismantle it, or even preparing to dismantle it, Israeli Air Force and fighter jets immediately started striking those soldiers who are around that device. The strike was continuous for like many hours, from what I remember, and the whole incident was very foggy. No one knew what was going on. And the next morning, the Syrian government gave the account of the story. They revealed that there was a spying device there, Israeli spying device, and they were trying to dismantle it. The moment they started to dismantle it, they were quickly attacked by the Israeli jets. Some soldiers were killed, and I don't remember the exact casualties. But this account from the Syrian army, from the Syrian military, was not in public, like it wasn't in international media. The one that caught international media was the account that the Israelis gave. Israelis said the following. Israelis said that they discovered and detected a Turkish listening device, a spy device basically. And they quickly acted to dismantle it. They sent in commandos or specialists in order to dismantle it and take it back to Israel. Now, this account is very strange if you know anything about this region, and I'll tell you why. 10 years ago, it was 2015, right? Okay, I think I forgot this detail. Israel claimed that spy device was put there by Turkey 10 years ago. Now, if you know anything about Syria and the conflict, how it was, the civil war, you would understand that that claim is so absurd, it makes no sense. First of all, that area 10 years ago, of course, it was under the regime forces. There was no way, like, okay, I won't say there was no way, but it would be extremely difficult for Turkey to get to that point, Turkish intelligence or Turkish agents to get to that point and put a spy device in that place to spy on Israel specifically too, which is even weirder. At that time, Israel and Turkey had good relations. So what's even crazier is when you think about it, at that time, Turkey had a lot on its plate. Russia was at its borders. There were the PKK militants literally at their borders too. These are separatist militias who want to divide Turkey, so Turkey is like sees them as a grave threat. And then there was fucking ISIS on their borders too. And also there was the Syrian regime forces. So Turkey had a lot on its plate at that time. There was no way they would just think about going to that place and planting devices at that area at that time. Like that would be like the last of their wishes or their plans because it makes no sense. That is like not even in the list of priorities, by the way. So that claim was just so weird to me because I know one or two things about the region. I'm not like someone who's uneducated about how this region works, the Middle East. So yeah, I'm saying all of this to say that Israel is onto something. They're trying to do something with this whole we're gonna get these terrorists wherever they are thing. And the tensions just escalated yesterday. Netanyahu had this event in Jerusalem where he was talking about how Jerusalem is a Jewish city and it will forever be a Jewish city, and he specifically named Erdogan, the president of Turkey, while talking about this. There's a lot of people who talk about Jerusalem. Why target specifically Erdogan? Again, I told you they were preparing something. Anyway, let's listen to what he has to say.
This is our city, Mr. Erdogan. It's not your city. It's our city. It will always be our city. It will not be divided again. This is.
So he's saying this to he's replying to Erdogan, who said he wants to see a two-state solution in Palestine, and it's Jerusalem as the capital of this new Palestinian independent Palestinian state. And this was his response. So Mr. Erdogan decided to respond, and basically he was like, we had the honor of serving the whole Jerusalem for 400 years. For centuries, we made Jerusalem a land of peace and tranquility with wisdom and tolerance. And Netanyahu does not know this. So he was not as outwardly attacking Netanyahu as Netanyahu was attacking him, but it's very clear. So basically, after that, yeah, and also in this speech, there's a place I don't think it's been covered, but Netanyahu was asking for these scriptures back. These scriptures which supposedly prove that Israel or the Jews are indeed the owners of it's their city, Jerusalem is their city, and these scriptures or whatever tablets or 2,700 years old thing is a proof because there's Jewish inscriptions on this stone, right? It's a proof, and it was from Jerusalem, by the way. So it's a proof that Jerusalem, at least that's how Israelis think, or Netanyahu thinks, that this is a proof that Jerusalem was historically a Jewish city, right? And after that, there was a response from Turkey, and they basically said, nope, we're not giving this back. We're not gonna give this inscription or tablets back. Understand? And in fact, they actually pulled this thing from the museum because they're afraid the Israelis are gonna do some covert mission, spy mission, as they always brag about, and steal this thing. So they pulled it out from the museum. But that's just the latest saga about these two squabbling. So something is cooking, something is brewing underneath, and we might see an explosion very soon. Hopefully we don't, but the way things are going, it looks like that's gonna be the case. And that something is weird. Yeah, I agree. Something is definitely weird. As I told you, they're preparing something, but nobody seems to understand what that is. Greater Israel is forbidden words. I mean, yeah, that's their dream, but the thing is, it's not as easy as they think it is. And I think they're making a huge gamble here. And I hope I talked about this, but Israel is going through very tough times. They've used all the influence and all the propaganda they could mobilize since October the 7th, and they are still losing big time. The propaganda war, they've lost it, and they're still losing it because the thing is still continuing, right? So they're very paranoid. But here's the thing, the way he thinks, because I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, why would this guy risk all of this? We've seen polls from the United States saying that Israel has lost a whole generation. The next generation is all against Israel. So Israel has lost a whole generation because it couldn't stop, when it was told to stop. If they stopped after a month or two into the whole invasion, things wouldn't have been this bad. But right now, for them, it's a do or die. They've already lost whatever. So what they're betting on now, in my opinion, and the way I see it, they're thinking this is a historical moment. It's not gonna come again. And they're making this huge, huge gamble. They're gonna risk everything. They're gonna go at everyone. And there can be only two outcomes from the actions that they're doing right now and the way they're behaving. They either win and take over all of Palestinian territories, West Bank, Gaza, and declare Israel like sovereign state, and also pacify all the neighboring countries, Iran, Turkey, and make itself the undisputed regional hegemon of the Middle East. Like no one could say a word to it. Or they fail their mission and everything turns to shit. And that, my friends, would undoubtedly usher in the beginning of the end of the state of Israel as we know it. So it's a huge, and I'm not even exaggerating, by the way, if they fail to annex Gaza and to finish the Palestinian story once and for all, which they're going through with, by the way, that's the plan. They want to kill, by the end of this all, they want to kill the whole Palestinian story once and for all. You know, they're gonna kick out some Palestinians and they're gonna leave some of them there and claim, you know, you see, there are Arabs between among us, blah blah blah, you know, living in peace. So that's the thing, basically. Either this plan works and pays off like a lot, and they become like the regional undisputed like kings of the region, or it just goes to shit. So who knows? Only time will tell. Are they gonna succeed? What do you guys think?